All right, so today in this Mastering Warhammer 40k series, we're going to be talking about the one thing you need to stop forgetting in your games, and that is screening. So if you are somebody that is currently struggling with how to screen in your games, or you're wondering why screening is literally game defining, you're definitely going to want to stick around because I'm going to give you the key strategies you can take with you into your next game and overall just help you become a better player. Now, we do have Necrons on the screen here. I am a Necron player through and through, but I would like to encourage you to stick around if you are not a Necron player because of the fact that these are generalities that I'm going to be talking about when it comes to this series. So even if you're not a Necron player, I think you're still going to get a lot of value out of this video today. So, excuse me. So, screening is a massive topic, okay? To be honest, I could sit here probably for an hour and talk about screening, but we're going to really condense this down and just try to give you the best amount of value in a short amount of time. So we're going to be talking about really why screening is game defining, my screening game plan depending on the matchup, screening in terms of blocking movement, blocking line of sight, denying secondaries, and the best units for screening, okay? So let's get into it here. So the first thing that I want to talk about is, because this is going to go before we move any of our pieces, is a screening game plan depending on the matchup. Now you're like, yo, what do you mean by that? So first thing that I'm always thinking about is what archetype is my enemy? Okay, so if we think about this in more of a macro perspective or simpler terms, okay, if I'm playing against World Eaters, right, they are a full melee army, more or less. They don't have a lot of shooting. A lot of times they don't have a lot of units. So before the game even starts, before we're deploying, before we're rolling any dice, I'm already thinking about in my head, okay, in this matchup, screening is going to be very important in terms of preventing their pieces to get to me, right? So we're looking for more of a blocking movement type game plan, okay, which is what I want to more or less cover first, okay? So primarily with screening against this matchup is we're focusing on, again, blocking movement. So we're going to take World Eaters, for example, or Blood Angels, or Orcs, right? Those melee, aggro, high-pressure armies that Star Shatter has generally a hard time dealing with. There are also other armies that have a hard time dealing with it as well. And it's a very good archetype that you have to be prepared for. So with that said, what are some things that you can do screening in terms of blocking movement? Okay, so this is a typical deployment here and this is layout 6, Crucible of Battle, GW layout here. So and this is like a typical deployment with a list that I run in Star Shatter. There's a couple that I'm kind of bouncing between right now, but this is just, again, a generality for teaching purposes, okay? So let's say we have, let's just use World Eaters, for example. Everybody knows World Eaters. So let's say we got some Exalted 8-bound here. We got Angron back here. We got some more. We got some Berserkers over here. Maybe we got some like Chaos Spawn over here, right? Okay. So more or less in my head, I'm thinking about, okay, how can I either annoy my opponent in terms of creating move blocks? And this is where, again, these flayed ones are going to come into, are very important in your list, just because they give you a lot of options in terms of scoring, but also for screening and secondary. So, like, for instance, if I'm playing against World Eaters, this unit might actually be deployed up here because I'm trying to deny their scout moves and, again, move block them. The main goal against melee guys, I'm trying to slow them down, right? Same thing with Orcs, right? A lot of times they're going to have like trucks, right? Here or something where they need to get transports up and get on the objective. Same type of idea. You could have your flayed ones either screening over here to be annoying, or you could bring them over here, and you're simply just trying to create a move block, trying to slow them down. And you could be asking, well, you just have like a unit out there that's like, they could just shoot and kill, right? And yes, that's entirely correct. But blade ones are 60 points. A lot of other armies have like some sort of cheap infiltrating unit, right? Scouts. you know, they're worth their weight in gold because they're synergizing with trying to slow down your opponent to help your army function better. You're trying to create that space, buy you some time, so more of your shooting pieces can shoot at the army and get the most value out of them. So, um, when it comes to screening and move blocking, those are the biggest things that we're looking for, right? We're trying to block these lanes in the early game, and then when it gets more towards you know, the mid to later game, you're trying to you know, create move blocks in different ways. Where let's say you're playing against like demons, for example. Okay, they have a couple of like those big monsters, or Tyranids. Maybe Tyranids would actually be an even better example. They have, like, you know, bigger monsters that you don't want to get into combat. A lot of them don't fly. And so that's when it comes in handy to have units like Flayed Ones, like Tomb Blades, like Triarch Stalkers that are big and they can take up a lot of space on the table, right? So, you know, if you're playing against Tyranids and they got like a big monster here, a lot of times, like if you don't have a way to interact with it, sometimes you can just move a Triarch Stalker up there or something else, and you just move block it. And, you know, you're just tying up like this 300 or 400 point unit. Granted, like a Tyranid monster isn't going to be 300 or 400 points, but, you know, maybe it's like a 200 or 300 point unit. And, you know, you have a Triarch Stalker in front of it or something else, and you're just tying up that unit. You're just making it annoying to move around the table. Okay. So that's one big way that screening is very important. It's game defining as blocking movement. And there are some really good pieces for that. You know, Triarch Stalkers, Tomb Blades, Blade Ones, all of those type of things, or those type of units are extremely good at doing stuff like that. Okay. So let's talk about if we're playing against a shooting army. Okay, so let's talk about Tau. Let's talk about Guard, right? Let's talk specifically about Guard and their new Bridgehead Strike Force detachment, because I think it is going to be very spicy. You're going to be seeing, I think, in a lot of tournaments coming up. And deep striking Scions coming down 6 inches, Aquilons, you know, all that stuff. And you're like, yo, this is just a nightmare to deal with. How do I screen against something like this, right? So again, going back to what is my screening game plan for this matchup? So for this matchup, I don't have to worry about, I mean, move blocks in every game, there are going to be opportunities for move blocks, but the primary focus is going to be on trying to limit where his units can drop. So there's like a different hierarchy as far as priority in your head, right? So in this matchup, I'm thinking more about board control screening, okay? And also blocking line of sight, blocking ways that they can drop in, because that is the synergy of their detachment. And so if I can limit that ability, then hopefully it can give me a leg up. And again, this is why we want not only enough trash in our list to be able to do secondaries, but also enough trash in our list that we can screen properly, okay? So let's talk about that here. So when we're talking about Bridgehead Strike Force, okay, a big thing that we need to maintain, or just in Guard in general, is you're really trying to maintain a line of scrimmage, right? You want roughly a 50-50 board control throughout the game in general. You don't want to necessarily stack one side and not have enough over here, because then again, it creates problems where, you know, they can just like cheeky just drop in somewhere. Okay, so you're like, all right, well, what does that exactly look like? Okay, so let's say, for instance, here we have a game that is played out. So we have Flayed Ones up here. We have, let's say, like a Stalker up here. Maybe like Flayed Ones are right here. Let's say these guys went on the objective here. This thing staged up. We have the king. Let's just say like he auto a 6 advance, and we have like our Silent King castle up here, right? Let's say during the reserve step, we had an arc back here. Okay. Actually, I'm gonna save that for a second. So let's say we have some Flayed Ones like staged up here behind a wall. Okay. So pretty simple setup to start, right? And you're gonna see here, you're like, well, okay, you have a gap right here and right here, right? that we definitely do not want any part of, right? Like Scions, huge issue, okay? So a lot of times what you can do, and this is, again, this is just one Locust Heavy Destroyer. You could use, excuse me, just a regular Locust Destroyer is really good for this as well. But let's just go back and talk about it here. So again, for screening against like Bridgehead Strike Force or any army that has a lot of up and down units, we're just going to move this Locust Heavy Destroyer back here, and we're looking to screen out our 6s or our 9s, okay? I'm using more of an extreme example because with Bridgehead Strike Force, you genuinely do have to screen out the 6s just because that detachment just does so much damage. Or you could think about like Tau Ret Cadre is another really good example, where you genuinely have to screen out those 6s because the damage from those units dropping in is sometimes devastating and game defining if you do it. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll have, again, where Doomsday Arcs really come in handy with their size is because they're so long. So what ends up happening is that you could drop, like, let's say it's like turn 2, I'm dropping a Doomsday Arc here because we have all of these assets that are shifting up, okay, and providing a screen up here. And then this arc is going to screen out the 6s this way and this way. And then let's say we have like a Locust Heavy Destroyer. And I apologize, it's sticking there. Okay, like right here, but again, we're trying to like watch this line of this line here as well. But I'm pretty sure there is a world where you can basically have a guy here, screen out the 6, 6 here, 6 here, 6, right, and then all the way across. Okay, so the coming full circle here, what's really important when it also comes to is like list design, as you're seeing. So when you are designing lists, it really helps when you have almost a similar to like a combined arms approach where you have a couple shooting pieces and you have a couple melee pieces, where those melee pieces can shift up, and then you have long range shooting pieces in the back. This is why you see a lot of lists that you have 2 Predators, you have 2 Doomsday Arcs, you have 2 Vindicators, because they synergize in terms of allowing you to push resources forward, and then having those big durable tank pieces in the back that are doing essentially double duty. They're screening for you in the backfield, they're durable, and they're providing firepower downrange, or at least having your opponent respect these firing lanes, okay? So even though these units maybe aren't shooting the first 2 turns, they're providing you a ton of value because they're doing all these other things that you don't really necessarily see. But it's a tremendous help. And so that is as far as, so again, coming back full circle with Bridgehead and the Bridgehead Strike Force, or like any army where you have to screen out like a 6-inch deep strike. I think one of the other biggest things with this is denying secondaries. Okay, so when you're also screening, you're denying their detachment rule more or less, or making it more difficult for them to either score secondaries or score primary potentially. So when we're talking about denying secondary, engage on all fronts, right? Containment, if you screen enough, if you can't get out like their deployment zone, sometimes it can put them in tricky spots. Behind enemy lines is a big one, right? So a couple of these like key secondaries, by you not screening, could be massive, where they draw, let's just say, like, hypothetical, they draw, let's give you some like fringe cases here. Let's just say you're like, oh, okay, this Doomsday Arc, it doesn't have like enough, it doesn't have anything to shoot at, I'm just going to keep it in reserve. Okay. And let's say you forgot, you're like, well, if they drop back there, they're not going to kill the king or whatever, not, So next turn they draw no prisoners and behind enemy lines. And you didn't screen out your 6s. They drop guy right here. And then all of a sudden, now they have like 2 easy targets. They could pick up this Spider, they could pick up this Locust Destroyer, and they score behind enemy lines. So you just gave them not only like a free 7 points just by not screening, but that you're also just lost like resources when you didn't even have to lose. Okay. So these are things that like bad screening exposes. Like if I could give you any recommendation from this video, is at the start of every turn, you should always be asking yourself these three things. Okay, how am I scoring my secondaries this turn is the number one. How can I deny my opponent's secondaries or make it or deny their primary going in this turn, excuse me. And then how am I screening the board? Those are like the top three things that I always think about at the start of every battle round or every one of my turns, okay? So before I even move any of my pieces, like top of turn, okay, how am I scoring my secondaries after I draw them? How am I denying my opponents some primary? Is there a way I can do that? And then how am I screening? Okay, because board control is everything in this game, all right? So as far as best units when it comes to screening, you're trash. Like so a lot of your cheap stuff, if it's cheap, if it's fast, is what you want. So this is a reason why I love running Ophidians, Locust Destroyers, Triarch Stalkers, Flayed Ones, Tomb Blades, all of these units. I mean, you think about in any other army as well, same type of idea. You're looking for those units that are between like, 40 and 100 points that are fast. They don't have to be super durable. They just have to be annoying, okay? Just annoying to deal with. And that is mainly what you're looking for as far as for screening pieces. So a lot of times, if you're feeling like in games that you lost because there was a pocket open, or they got somewhere that you weren't expecting, I would self-reflect back and ask yourself, okay, one, do I have enough units in my army? Okay. And then the second thing I would ask is, the way that I'm moving my pieces, does it synergize with what I want to do? Okay. And what I mean by that is coming back to this concept where I have this Silent King castle here, but I know all of these pieces need to move up because I need to stay within the aura, right? So what is going to stay back here that is going to screen and still provide me value? These are the questions that you have to answer. And on some layouts, it's even harder, like Hammer and Anvil, where you have these big, deep deployment zones, and you have enough assets that you want to shift forward, but you also need a couple little things in the back that are screening. And again, this is why Ophidians are also so valuable, because you can just drop them in via Deep Strike, and they're providing a screen, but then you can also pick them up in your turn and then use them for scoring. And then if you don't get a card that you can't score on, just drop them back down, right? So Ophidians are extremely valuable going into this. Excuse me if I could talk. Extremely valuable going into this new meta. I have not written a list, whether it's in Awakened or Star Shatter, without a unit of Ophidians. Most lists have 2 units of them, because there are so many different ways you can play them. When it comes to screening, I think they are the premier screening unit for Necrons. Mandrakes would be something similar for like Drukhari. Up, down, the Deep Strike, they can pop in. They're small, they're cheap. It's great. Okay. So coming full circle here. So as far as with screening, again, it's literally game defining. At the start of the game, what really helps your screening game plan is, again, thinking about your matchup. So is this like a full melee army where I just need to move block? I don't have to worry about up-down mechanics, that sort of thing. Or is this an up-down army? Am I playing against Vanguard Spearhead? Am I playing against Grey Knights? Am I playing Tau? There's still so many up-down armies in this game that are going to be good in this meta, and your priority needs to focus depending on the matchup. So up-down armies, you're really emphasizing board control and really screening out those 6s. Against like a melee army, your primary emphasis is really creating move blocks. And then board control and some of those screening pieces would be second. So, again, I'm going to link 2 videos up top. If you stuck around, seriously appreciate you. And until the next one, peace.